Hello everyone, this is Tim. This is going to be a pretty long review of A Song of Ice and Fire. This is another RPG basically set in the Westeros setting for the A Song of Ice and Fire novels by George R.R. Martin. And I'm going to go through a little bit and just detail some of the things that jumped out at me, some of the things I like, some things I, maybe would ignore or do slightly differently. The version of A Song of Ice and Fire that I have, that I'm going to be reviewing, is the Pocket Edition. I know that there's a hardback that's in full color, but this one is in black and white. So when you look through some of the images that I'll show you, that's the reason why they're in black and white in it, Chapter 1 is a Westeros primer, and it's just a general overview of pretty much the entire setting. This chapter has a very concise history of the setting, and it goes through the various descriptions of the major areas and the major houses that basically rule them. It has a dark black and white map, and all of the illustrations in the Pocket Edition are in black and white. I don't obviously have the full color hardback. The standards of the major houses are there along with that map, and I think they do a very good job of just illustrating just those things and just all those small illustrations throughout the book. It all has that same feeling to them. They all seem like they were done by the same artist or artists. And at first, I wasn't really sure if I liked the style of the art. It's kind of dark. But as I went through the book, it just seemed to fit with the material. There's details on King's Landing, suggestions on having players read this primer or read the novels to get familiar with the setting. I think that'd be a great idea, just to sort of get used to what's going to happen, the sort of feel, the tragic edge that are basically in the novels. And to basically know some of the traditions and morals and such that their characters might know. There's things like customs, laws, and the social norms. Talks a little bit about technology, the faith, gods and the religions, knighthood, and maesters of the Citadel. The Westeros Primer is a great way to get your players at least semi-familiar with the setting if they aren't familiar with the books, and then to just jump right into the game. There's various things in this book that help do that, help to get the GM to introduce the setting to the players and then just start playing. This game uses a bunch of d6 dice. The GM will tell you what character ability the action is testing. You then roll that many d6s and total them all up. Bonus dice are a little tricky. You sometimes get bonus dice because of a specialty your character has. Sometimes you also get bonus dice depending on the situation or the place where the action or scene is happening. If your ability gives you 3 dice and you have 2 bonus dice, you then roll 5 dice and total up the top 3 dice and essentially ignore the 2 lowest dice. So, for example, if you were to roll a 5, a 4, a 4, a 2, and a 1, you would add up basically only the 5, the 4, and the 4, and you'd get a total of 13. You basically drop or ignore the 2 and the 1. If this 13 is higher or equal to the difficulty or the target number, then the task is performed successfully. Bonus dice are usually detailed as a number and then a large capital B afterwards. Modifiers can be given by the GM for situational and environmental factors, for smoke, fear, things that are happening on the battlefield or wherever you're attacking, or even in social situations. These modifiers just come off of the total. The game also asks for completely random rolls at times that aren't tied to character stats, such as an unmodified 3d6, and you basically just add them up and look for a total. But most of the things are tied to your abilities. This game really doesn't distinguish abilities from skills. They're all pretty much the same. They're handled the same mechanically. The abilities of the character are flexible, so you can achieve success with various abilities. So you can come to the same conclusion, be successful in what you're trying to do, but you might be rolling a different ability than someone else might roll. Perhaps you'd use your status and, claim your royal bloodline instead of trying to fast talk past somebody. The GM sets the difficulty for each test from automatic, which is 0, to heroic, which is 21+. Some challenges are simply impossible for characters with low ranks in the ability. Each difficulty target number has a minimum ability rank for success. So you have to see if you can even achieve it. So let's say you're trying to do something really, really difficult and you only have one rank in that ability. The GM's going to say that's just beyond you. That's physically impossible for you to do. If you beat the difficulty by a large margin, the game looks at the degrees of success, achieving the action faster or better or with more damage, etc. So if you beat that target number by a lot, you're going to do more with it. And especially with like combat and other things, you normally multiply these degrees of success by how much damage you've done and so forth. There are also extended tests where each roll of the dice equals an amount of time given by the GM. The player is basically looking for a number of successes, in this case, for an extended action. And this is kind of the same way that World of Darkness does it. Competition tests have both characters roll, and the one that beats the difficulty by the highest degree of success wins. And this would be used if you're trying to compete in the same goal and see who does it faster. Conflict tests are combat, intrigue, which is basically social combat, and war. The difficulty of these tests is your opponent's defense, and this is usually like a passive number. There's various formulas for how to come up with these defenses. The defense number is usually equal to 4 times the target's ability. Combat defense uses more than one ability for defense, and you basically just add up everything, all these different abilities. And what's nice about that is that you can't just have like a high dex character that's just really hard to hit. Awareness goes into it, and other abilities as well. In that regard, it kind of reminded me of RuneQuest a little bit. The active action normally rolls, but I would suggest letting the players roll a little more than the NPCs. I think it's a little more fun for them. Other characters can give assistance for tough tests. They give a modifier to the roll, basically equal to half of their ability, and you round down. And it has to be the same ability that's being tested. Let's say athletics is being tested. A nearby ally could assist them with half of their athletics ability if they roll high enough. This is normally limited to like 2 characters assisting. They don't want a bunch of people dogpiling on all the actions. Taking more time can give you more test dice. They just basically give you extra dice to roll in your dice pool. For degrees of failure, if you fail by more than 5 or more, it's considered, kind of like a critical failure. It's kind of like a fumble. There's other things like injuries and frustration as a result of combat and intrigue, as well as composure, which are kind of like social hit points, so we'll get into that later. Alright. There's wounds that give penalty dice to test rolls. If there's various ways why you would get a wound versus an injury versus hit point loss. There's flaws that give penalty dice, and penalty dice basically subtract one of your test dice after you roll them, canceling the lowest die first. And this would happen after any bonus dice are dropped. There are 9 archetypes. You've been looking at some of their pictures, which are provided, and they're basically essentially just pre-generated characters to get you jumping right into the game. You can take one of these characters and just start playing, which is very nice. I like how they did that. The character generation system is a little involved, so I think that's great. They give you a standard house, they give you some player characters, and I like that this game sets up the tools where you could really jump into this game fast. The archetypes that are provided are the Anointed Knight, the Godsworn, Hedge Knight, Heir, Maester, Noble, Retainer, Scout, and Squire. Chapter 3 is a little involved, and I'm not really sure how much detail I'm going to put into it. But what's nice is that you can actually skip character creation entirely if you want to use those archetypes from the last chapter. The default assumption in this game is that every one of the player characters are a part of the same house, and that they all work together and are cooperative and try to put their house before self, although not all characters are going to do that. And later in the book, it talks a little bit about doing things a little bit differently, perhaps playing on the wall or playing as sellswords, that sort of thing. Yeah, all of the PCs basically work towards their own goals a little bit, but always in the background is the house and the goals of the house, the responsibilities of being from that house. And for the most part, player characters are going to be from a minor house that you make up together. But I'm sure if a GM wanted to, you could play Lannisters or Starks, Greyjoys, whatever you wanted to play. I think this model works pretty well, especially for keeping the PCs working together. It gives them in-game and in-setting reason to work together, because there are some games where you're like, okay, the assumption is we all have to work together, regardless if it makes sense for our actual characters. So this is nice because it makes sense. Stabbing your brother in the back, while could be advantageous if you are not in the line for the throne, etc. That stuff will happen, but for the most part, players are going to work together as characters. Basically, when a character dishonors the house, the other PCs will suffer. So there are consequences. If you're going to fly off the hilt, like I tend to do as a character, the other players might get some soap and wrap them in washcloths and beat you in the stomach until you stop acting like an idiot. If you are, doing things and getting a good name for yourself and a good name for your house, your other characters will prosper as well. So you're all in the same boat. It's beneficial for everyone to work together and to try to keep the name of their house intact and their honor intact. Characters need to try to balance their goals versus the goals of their house. I can see some dilemmas popping up in game because of this, but that's part of the fun. Of course, you don't need to, be real tough on your characters. Maybe you like the fact that there's infighting, and maybe the characters and players like, character versus character. So maybe their house is known for lots of infights. You really can take this in a lot of different directions and just have a lot of fun with it. A general guideline or outline for how character creation works is you set the house and the lands, the lands that your house owns. Character concepts such as age, status, roles, background, goals, motivations, virtues, and vices. There's lots of little steps that help you come up with the flesh and blood of your character. Step 3 is assign your abilities, and like I said, stats and skills are pretty much one thing. They're not separate. Step 4, assign specialties, and specialties give you bonus dice for your abilities. Step 5, destiny points and benefits, and you can buy benefits with destiny points. Step 6, flaws and drawbacks. Step 7, possessions. 8, derived statistics, and talks a little bit about intrigue and combat. And step 9, finish up your character and play. First step of character creation is house and lands. But you can use the default minor house that is set up in the game so that you don't have to do any of these steps either. So that's a very nice thing. It's like, okay, it's already made up. We can jump right into it. We can use the regenerated characters. We have the regenerated house, and we can just get right into things. If you do want to make your house, it's very intricate and detailed, and it's also a bit random, which is kind of fun. But we'll detail that in another section. Step 2 is character concept. And I know what you're thinking. It's like, okay, this will just be, what I have in mind for my character. But there's different steps that flesh out your character as you go. Age, you can have it be random or you can choose it. Basically just talk to your GM, see what they want to do. Age affects the starting experience and possibly flaws. The older your character is, the more flaws they possibly have. You can set your status, or you can have it be random. Again, talk to your GM. Status is a mix of reputation, birth, rank, etc. Status can have benefits and responsibilities. All of the PCs in the default house game need to have some sort of status associated with them, usually. And they need to fit into various positions within that house. The default house, the default setting, the way they want you to set things up, is that the lord of the house is an NPC and that the player characters are below them. Heirs or kennel masters, master of horse, that sort of thing. Status is an ability, and it must be purchased first before you buy any other abilities at all. So it's trying to tell you the status is important because of your rank, and there's things like the House Fortunes roll that depend on status, as well as you can use status. It's a very versatile ability. You can use it to get through situations that you might not be able to bluff your way out of, or you might not be able to fight your way out of. Like saying, I'm a Lannister, we always pay our debts, and you get out of situations like that. You determine your role in the group. Roles kind of act like suggestions, and they just tell you how to try to work your character out, to try to have them, sort of like ways to build your character. It's a tool to help you build your characters in a way that fits one of those roles. Each one has suggested abilities and general suggestions for playing them, such as expert, fighter, leader, rogue, and schemer. You can, of course, blend these different roles and have a mixture of 2 or 3. It's not hard and fast, like these are your only skills you're allowed to have, these are the only abilities. They're really just suggestions, so take them as that. If you're going to make your own character, whatever idea you think is in your head, try to make that character. But these are just good, helpful tools if you want to try to figure out, okay, I want to be a schemer with a little bit of fighter thrown in, so I'm going to look at these 2 and see what abilities they have. So it's good sort of like signposts on how to make your character. For determining your background, there are random rolls if you need help. You also can set up a goal. A goal should be something big, broad, and nebulous, something that's going to take a while to achieve. Motivation, this is the reason why you want to attain your goal. This is normally tied to something in your character's background that you've already worked on or something you'll come up with later. Virtue, this is like some favorable character trait, and vice is a negative one. And both can really help you with your role playing. Just try to figure out, what's your best strong point, what's your worst point. The next section of character creation is assign your abilities, and all your abilities start out at 2. That's the default number, and you really can just buy them up past that. Your age determines how many experience points you get. The older you are, the more abilities you can have. But you'll start to see how age has its pros and cons. You have to buy your status first, like I said. You can reduce any ability to 1 for more experience points, so that's a nice option, especially if one of your vices basically points you to say that, there's no way that, I have this ability at 2, it should probably be a 1. And again, just talk to your GM, see if they approve of what you're doing. You have to expend all of your experience during character creation. If you have any left over, it's basically just wasted. And like I said, older characters get more XP. Next step, after you spend all of your experience points for abilities, you're then given like specialty points to buy, or specialty experience to buy your specialties with. And this is also based on age. Specialties are areas of expertise within an ability, and they give you those bonus dice like I talked about. So you're going to be rolling a pool of d6s, and bonus dice just improve the odds of getting higher totals. They really don't give you extra dice to just total everything together, so it's a little fine point you have to remember. And no specialty can be more dice than the ability that it's based off. Again, older characters get more XP for specialties. Step 5 is Destiny points and benefits. This is based on age. You can invest some of your Destiny points into benefits, and younger characters have more Destiny points and can have more benefits. You can spend them to change the game in a minor way. They're kind of like fate points. Burn them to change something significant, or invest them and buy benefits. So the temptation might be to just buy a bunch of cool benefits and not be able to affect the game, but you might find that might actually be deadly for your character, because you might want to get out of sticky situations with these Destiny points. So keep that in mind. You might not want to blow all of these. And benefits remind me of the D20 feats, so if you're familiar with those, you kind of understand what benefits are. Step 6 is flaws and drawbacks. Flaws give a -1 penalty to an ability. Drawbacks are still negative, but they are somewhat less detrimental to your character. Try to pick ones that resemble your vices. The older your character is, the more flaws and drawbacks you have. Starting possessions. You get some basic clothing, a signet ring if you're an heir, and then You make a status test to see how much gold you actually have. Gold dragons. That's the currency. Well, one form of currency. And you can buy equipment, and you have to spend at least half of your money on equipment. Next step is derived statistics. You have your intrigue defense, which is sort of like an armor class for social combat. And it uses a couple different abilities: awareness, cunning, and status. Again, there's the status coming back into it again, so remember that. Composure. These are sort of like social hit points, and this is 3 times your will ability. Combat defense is a mix of agility, athletics, and awareness, plus any defensive bonus from shields that help you, defend or parrying. So you'll see that you can't be as much of a one-trick pony in this game. You have to have a mix and a variety of abilities to be able to defend and take part in intrigue and combat. Health is 3 times your endurance. Armor rating depends on what armor you're wearing. And damage is by weapon, and that's like just the base damage. If you get degrees of success over the target number, which is their defense, you get to multiply that damage. So it's not just what the weapon does, it's also how high you can roll, which is nice. I kind of like that idea that if you roll really high, you're really going to smack them in a good spot. Talks about rewards and improvement, things that you can get in-game, like coin, buy equipment, or invest that money in your house to increase your house's resources, which we'll talk about later. Glory, if you gain glory, if you return to your lands, you have to physically return to your lands, you can invest that in the house's resources. So if you won like some impressive tournament and you come back home, your people will applaud you and your house gets a little bit more renowned. Experience, you can increase your abilities, specialties, or get more destiny points. Specialties are the cheapest, at least at first. Destiny points are the most expensive, and the higher you raise an ability, the more expensive it is.